Welcome back to Practical Magic and part 3 of our Meditation Fairy Workshop. Liana is now going to explain some of the books about fairies, but Robert can get fairy books and fairy calendars. Whatever you like, you can get. And Liana, would you like to take over and explain about your books?
Well, they're not actually my books. If you'd like to know any more about fairies, there are some wonderful books that I have encountered. The first book is the Fairy Book, A Complete Guide to Magical World of Fairy by Samantha Gray. There's also The Ultimate Fairies Handbook by Susanna Marriott. Then there's The Enchantment of the Fairy Realm by Ted Andrews. We have Working with Fairies, Magical Spells, Potions, and Recipes to Attract and See Them by Anna Franklin, and The Fairy Bible by Teresa Mori. They're all really amazing books that will teach you a whole lot about fairies. So if you have any other questions, you can either come and take one of our fairy classes, or you can come and get these books here at Practical Magic and Practical Magic 2, and you can learn about them on your own.
Or you can go to practicalmagic2.com, click on the Contact Us button, leave us a question, and I will get it to Liana and get her response for you. And you'll see it on a later show. Tell us about the different fairy artists, Amy Brown, Jessica Galbert. Do you prefer one over the other, or?
There's actually several different. There's actually there's a lot of different fairy artists.
But I think Amy and Jessica are the two most.
They are the two most. They are the two most. I don't really want to pick a favorite.
Okay.
I don't really want to pick a favorite.
One of my favorite things, speaking of fairy artists, is Nene Thomas. Puts out little mini fairies, and they look fantastic on your Yule or your Christmas tree.
Okay.
Actually, it's interesting that you talk about putting fairies on the Christmas tree, because Christmas trees are supposed to be for fairies. The ornaments that you put on the Christmas tree are supposed to be special, like little ornate symbols for the fairies. And the angel that goes on the top of the Christmas tree is actually a fairy.
Is there any candle you can burn to honor the fairies in their honor?
Well, there's not a certain like scent candle that you would burn. It would definitely be. It's very much like Wicca, where you would go with the element. Like if you were doing something for a certain element,
Okay.
then you would go with the elemental fairy.
Okay.
And one of the things that you should definitely do, especially like if you're a Wiccan, is, especially when you're doing rituals, is honor the elemental fairies. And by doing that, that will enhance your ritual. And even if you're not Wiccan, by honoring the fairies in your everyday life, they will bring favor upon your life. Fairies will often, they will take things, especially they're especially attracted to shiny things, so they will take like earrings or glittery things or shiny little things. They'll take your rings, they'll take your necklaces, they'll take anything shiny, anything sparkly. You might find something missing or out of place, and it's usually the work of a fairy. And by leaving an offering out to them, even leaving a little dish of sparkly things out for them, or leaving out some milk or honey, or leaving out something special for them, leaving out a special fairy house, it will deter them from taking your things.
So in essence, you could take one of those crystal candle holders and put fairy dust in it to honor your fairies, so they don't mess with your merchandise.
Absolutely.
Which we both sell, by the way.
How would you honor the fairies in the dead of winter? By lighting floral scented candles to remind them that summer is coming, or?
You could do that, or you could even put out plants. It's fairies especially like it when you have potted plants in the house. They don't see it as that you are capturing plants. They like having plants around. In fact, every plant and every crystal has its own fairy. So you know how they say when you talk to plants, it makes them grow better? Well, it makes them grow better because you're talking to the fairy of the plant.
Well, maybe that's why my poinsettias are still blooming, because the fairies are honoring those plants being in the house.
Absolutely.
This is the first year that I've had them last from December to the end of February. So it's strange that they're all 3-stemmed poinsettias and I have 3 of them and they're still blooming.
Yep. So the more you talk to your plants, the better they'll grow. And it's not just a coincidence. It's because you're talking to your fairy. It's because you're talking to the fairies of those plants, and you are honoring them and you're letting them know that you care about them.
Does that go for bamboo as well?
Absolutely. Bamboo has a spirit. Bamboo has a spirit fairy.
Bamboo is a prosperity plant also.
It's a living thing. Crystals are living things. They each have their own fairy. They're earth elements. They're from the earth. Trees have their own fairies as well. Their spirit fairies are older. But they each have their own fairies. There's also a fairy, there's also a lady of the forest. Mm-hmm. Not only do all the trees in the forest each have their own fairies, but then there is a lady of the forest who's kind of like the overseer of the whole forest, who kind of like protects the whole forest. So a lot of times if somebody gets kind of like lost in the forest, they might report seeing somebody, like an old lady in the forest, or who gave them directions like out of the forest or something like that. And that it's not uncommon for people to have reported seeing somebody. And it's also not uncommon for people to report having seen somebody and then, they turned their back and they were gone.
Yeah. Quick story. I know Tinkerbell is one of the most famous fairies, and I'm glad Disney did it back in the day. But I know this person, and I won't mention names. They figured out that we sold fairies here, and they are diehard, very religious people, and they had one on their back of the car. And once they found out that we sold fairies, they removed it. I think that was hilarious, because fairies are universal, and that you don't have to be Wiccan to believe in fairies. You can be Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, doesn't matter. It's a children's thing. It was made for children, and yes, they do exist, but it's just, I thought it was funny that she removed it.
Well, fairies aren't just for children. Fairies are
for
adults too.
Because we're all children. I know I'm 5 years old in my
it's
body.
It's actually interesting because adults actually lose their imagination, and adults get carried away with all of the busy things in life.
All the burdens.
And they lose the ability to see fairies, and they lose the ability to be in touch with that other self that can see the other world. Mm-hmm. And children, you'll often see children talking to their imaginary friends, and usually they're talking to fairies. Usually what's happening is they can actually see the fairies, and people just think, oh my God, they're just talking to themselves. They're just playing with their dolls, they're just playing with whatever. Really, they're actually probably talking to fairies. And people who are in touch with the fairies, a lot of times people will say, oh, they're just insane. Yeah. But really, they're just more in tune.
I have an interesting point. You said about the lady in the forest. Well, that would only make sense because you have Jack and the Green, or the Green Man of the forest, and he would need a consort in order to keep things going every year and reproducing and becoming
Absolutely.
green over and over again.
Well, thank you very much for coming by. You will be again here soon for Shock Cleanse again, the Fairy Workshop. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to go to practicalmagic2.com and click on Contact Us. This is Robert Vecchio.
And Steve Pulowski.
Good night and blessed be.
Have a great week.